Good evening, everybody. It's Monday, March 15th, 2021. My name is Mike Langford, and welcome back to another episode of DearBands Live, the podcast that explores the paths and stories of career-minded artists and music industry professionals. My guest tonight is a studio and touring drummer based at the highly competitive music hotbed that is Nashville, Tennessee, longtime member of American pop-punk group Amber Pacific, as well as the first call on drums for the voice of Creed, Scott Stapp. He's released instructional DVDs, teaching, inspiring, and performing clinics across America, and proudly endorses a handful of top drumming brands, including DW Drums, Paiste Cymbals, Evans Drumheads, and Promark Drumsticks. Please welcome my guest tonight, Dango Cellan. Dango.
Hello, what's up, man?
Not so much. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you for joining me. What's going on in Nashville?
Man, it's raining today, but Nashville is starting to open up, and we are pretty fortunate just being in the South. The work is starting to happen. The music's starting to come a little bit, and so it's been, a weird year for everybody, crazy year with the pandemic, and touring all shut down. I haven't toured in a year now, but thankfully stuff is picking up in town a little bit, so I'm excited about that.
Yeah, it's been a strange last 12 months, to say the least, for so many musicians. I just want to say your drum room there looks amazing. Is that's where you live, or is that an outside studio, or?
It is literally in my house. I bought the house in January of last year, and oddly enough, it was a huge blessing how it worked out to get a house and then to start the studio in January. The day I moved in, I hired a dear friend to start working on it. It was done in April. No idea the pandemic was coming, and so I'm really glad that I had the money to invest in it at the time. And so now I, got rid of the garage. The garage door was straight behind me where that stone wall is. So this is essentially 300 square feet I added to my house. And man, it's been a blessing because I've tracked in here. I teach lessons out of here every week. I do sessions semi-regularly, whenever they come up. It's not like I'm tracking every day, but whenever it comes, and I've done over 50 tracks now in here in less than a year. So it's been a huge blessing to have a studio.
Well, I've worked on a couple of those songs, I believe, that you've tracked.
That's correct. You have.
And they're coming from that room, which is some of the heaviest garage.
Yeah, some of the heaviest stuff I've tracked is what you've gotten to engineer, or not engineer this time. We've worked together in the past, obviously. Yeah. So.
Oh, it's still that's awesome. That's a converted garage, and because to me, like, I see that, and I'm like, I'm inspired. I want to sit in there and play drums.
Man, when I bought the house, I opened the dream was to have a drum room, and I opened the garage door, and I was like, oh, the ceiling's really high. This is going to be great. I could just kind of had the vision for it. So that's where it all started. Yeah.
To loop back again to, things going on in Nashville, like currently, word on the street, there's a lot of musicians in Nashville. Like what's the vibe? What's the vibe been in that city the last 12 months?
It's been hard. I mean, to be honest, there's been a lot of people leaving, a lot of people moving home, a lot of people battling depression and battling loneliness. It's been hard for me to not be out and about as much, but there's still a hope of Nashville that's just really strong, that I can't speak enough of the character of a lot of people here, because we had a tornado in the last year right before the pandemic. We've had a couple major power outage storms where, like, I'm talking like a week without power, and it's not like Texas where it's frozen, but I'm saying we've had some tough stuff in the last year in Nashville. There's some great community here where people look out for each other, people help each other. I got so many of texts during those shutdowns of like, hey, do you need anything? Are you okay? How's your house? And just there's a very cool community of that I can't say enough about. The people here, just my circle of friends of musicians, really try to look out for each other.
No, that's great to hear the community, and it just crossed my mind you were talking about that, because when I think Nashville, I think co-writes, I think recording sessions, I think people getting together, creating something that day, and that's kind of like the 9 to 5. It's like that's what your work day is, and not really feeling maybe safe or whatever, not being able to do that last 12 months, like it's a bit of a hit to the culture.
Yeah, and for sure. And for the guys who are guys and girls studio full time, they were able to work through some of the pandemic, but a lot of them started doing sessions from home, started doing remote tracking as well. They were doing sessions minimally. I'm not a full-time session guy, so it's like if I get a call to do it, I always take it because I love recording, and I love that I can do it from here because of convenience. I don't have to worry about if if anybody's going to be bummed being in the room with me or not. So that's been great. But yeah, some of the people that are just session people, like, I know it's been hard, but they still have a better outlet than the road guys and girls, because the people who tour full time have nothing at the, they're starting to come back, but it's been harder, I think, on the road people. I can't speak for everybody, but that's what it looks like.
No, I think there is light at the end of the tunnel for touring, because like you started, like Live Nation put that release out I think a month ago, saying they're expecting things to come back, and I feel like things are starting to open back up. So again, fingers crossed that things go smoothly. But the waters for musicians, that for just the arts in general, the last year. We could probably talk about that for an hour and a half. You mentioned you released the DVD recently?
I did. Not recently. Okay. I only have one out, and it's from my Amber Pacific days doing punk rock.
Okay.
So it's a while back, but just one of the things that some people have asked me about in the last year, and my teaching has upped in the last year because I'm home all the time. So I had, a handful of students. I've probably been teaching 13, 14 years now, so a while. But this year I've got to where I've got maybe around 14 or 15 students, and that means probably 10 every week, no matter what. Sometimes a few more, sometimes a few less, but I'm hitting 10 steady every week, and that's had me in the teaching zone of like, okay, several days a week I'm going to be teaching. Then I go downtown and play gigs several days a week, and I'll get a session or two from home if I'm fortunate. Then I'll play at church on a Sunday. So it's like a bunch of different stuff, but it's all, it's all adding up to what I'm doing in my work week.
Keeps you on your toes.
It does. And this is really cool. The newest thing is I started writing for a new website that does gear review. And so in January, I started where I'm writing several articles a month, and they're putting them up, and there's, Amazon links. And so the idea is that they can monetize the website based on, what you recommend. And yeah, I have my brands that I'm loyal to and faithful to, but I just try to be as honest as I can. And so like if it's about hi-hats or drum heads or whatever, I'll be like, there's this brand and this brand and this brand, and they're all great, they're all the best. It's just, what do you like? But these are probably your best option if you're a beginner, or if you're a guy playing rock or jazz or whatever. So I try to be really just open about it and say there's not one great option. You can play Paiste, you can play Zildjian, you can play Sabian and Meinl. They're all awesome. It's not like there's just one, here's what I prefer, but I just try to be real, because I know kids and people buying stuff, they want to read different reviews, and it's like, here's my one opinion. I'm not an expert, but I'm at least experienced, so here's what I suggest.
No, it's cool to get some exposure to like other gear, because a lot of us, it was in the music store, you bang around on something for a bit and you're like, okay, I think I kind of get an idea of what this is. I wanted to say too, full disclosure, I checked the pronunciation of Paiste.
You said it right. I was impressed.
Because I'm like, I can't screw that up. And you ran over Meinl. That's another one that am I saying that one right?
I think so, yeah.
Because it's another one where I see it, I'm just like, I'm just going to pretend I know how to say that, but I'm just not going to use that word because I don't know it. Same with Paiste. It's like I've had hats and 20 series hats and 20 series ride forever. And I didn't know the pronunciation of it. I had to look it up before. I'm like, I can't sound like an idiot. Promark got it. Evans got it.
Yeah,
but
yeah. When I met Kelly Paiste, I just remember asking, like, the first time I was there, and they're like, it rhymes with feisty, and they were so great about it. So it's like family now. I've been there 12 or 13 years with them. So awesome people.
How did you get hooked up with them?
So my early endorsements came in Amber Pacific. So I was touring in a punk band back in the early 2000s, right out of college. And initially I signed my first deal with Vic Firth, and then I signed with Meinl after that. They approached me. I didn't know anything about them. I was playing a mixture of Paistes and Zildjians on the road, just like, this is what I can afford. And so, yeah, that was the first time, getting a cymbal deal was a huge deal because I was breaking stuff, and they were really great to me at the time. And they put me in several ads in Modern Drummer, which I was like, 25, 26-year-old kid. It was just blew my mind. But, and they made great cymbals. So that was initially what happened. And then finally had an offer from Paiste because our band was in a good spot. And, it's always timing, and you come across either a rep or a rep recommends you or something. And like, I've been with Evans, I think 16 or 17 years, a long time. And it was a connection when I signed with Meinl. he said, what heads do you play? And I was like, Evans, man, but I can't find anybody. I can't get a deal. And he connected me with Steve Loebmeyer, who's now like a dear friend. And that's how I met him and ended up signing. And kind of endorsements come that way, where once you start doing them and you're doing credible gigs and you're on the road and you're touring, like more and more come. There's no set way. I mean, nowadays it's social media and it's totally different. But this was, 15 years ago. So then I went into Paiste. I played a bunch of stuff. They made me this great offer, and I was really excited. And I debated, went back and forth. But I went to Meinl and just said, here's the snare. I'm probably going to leave. I want to give you guys a chance to match that or let me go or whatever you think. But I just wanted to be respectful. Anytime I leave a company, I try to do it in a way that's like, you might be upset, but it's business, and they get that. And I'm a small fish anyways. Like, they have huge dudes at all these companies. So I just don't want to go out burning a bridge where they're like, well, that guy was really unprofessional. So when I left Vic, I was with Vic Firth 9 years. And then Promark offered me this amazing deal when I started touring with Red. And they were, a big Christian band. And so I had this opportunity there. And I was already with Evans, and Evans had bought D'Addario, bought Promark. So there was a chance. And Steve asked me about it, and Marco. And I was just like, man, unless there's a stick that's great, I don't want to do it because Vic makes the best stuff. And I'm not going to leave just for a good deal. And then they were so good to me. I mean, Steve sent me and Marco both sent me so many sticks on tour to try. And I got all these models. And I was like, this is way better customer service than I should be getting at my level. So I made the jump to Promark, and I've been with them since 2014. So yeah, I've been fortunate to work with a lot of big companies, and I've been with DW now almost a decade as well. And that was like a dream come true. I grew up loving Abe Laboriel Jr. and Josh Freeze, and they were both DW and Paiste guys. And so I was like, if I ever get there, that's what I want to play. I want DW. And in Nashville, it's a lot of Ludwig, a lot of Gretsch, and Pearl's here. So tons of the country guys love Pearl, and they're all great drums. I mean, obviously. So I play DW, and it's not like the biggest company in Nashville, but it's definitely a heavy hitter in the big market and in the rock world and the gospel world and R&B, and a lot of the rap and hip hop drummers use it. So I'm proud to be with all of those companies for sure.
No, all great companies. I'll admit to, it's just turning into the honesty hour. Working with drummers, there's a bit of a joke. Like, if I'm working with a band, the drummer will be like, it's okay to play my kit, or like the kind of the energy of like, don't touch my drums. Like, I don't touch people's drums, but I will admit, just a couple hits on a snare, a couple toms, and like, DWs sound really good. Like, then they record super well. There's a thing about like higher end drums where you're just like, there's a lot of mojo in the actual instrument.
So the thing I'd say about DW, whether you love them or hate them, is they have a very distinct sound. And I think that's what sets them apart as one of those companies. And I've gotten to tour a lot internationally over the last decade. And when you travel internationally, you can't get these small boutique companies, and you can't get a lot of the drums. So most places in other countries, you got DW, you got Yamaha, and Pearl or Tama, not usually both. But those four are about it. And so I've probably played not everywhere, but I've probably played in 15 countries, and I've had DW backlined in every country. And I always say that, send, this is what I play. And I have no trouble getting DW because they're that big. And so that's where I go. It depends on the gig, depends on what you're doing. But if you want consistency, if you want to fly in and have a backline kit and know what it's going to sound like, I'll show up, and I'll have my heads on it exactly what I play. And then I can usually tune it and get it dialed in. So that's what I think DW is so good at. You might love them or hate them, but it's
consistency.
Very consistent. Their quality control is top notch.
It's funny you bring up backline in other countries and touring and stuff, because with guitar players, I always say, like, Marshall and Mesa, like, you can find a lot of your tones between those two amps. So if you're touring and something happens, having a boutique guitar amp and something happens to when you're on tour, you might be up the creek. So like, figure out which stuff is more easily available should something happen. As you're saying, if you're doing fly dates, you're probably not flying over to Europe with your drums when you could just backline them over there.
Yeah, it's way too expensive to fly. So, I mean, most places you show up and you get whatever you get, but thankfully there's always DW.
Is there anything you do fly with gear-wise?
Yeah, I always fly with cymbals, always, which a lot of guys don't. But Paiste are hard to come by. Everybody's got Zildjian and Sabian. And companies will have Paiste, but you'll show up and it'll be like, hey, we got a 16 and 18-inch crash. And I'm just like, if I'm flying, I'm usually on a rock gig. And I'm like, I don't need a splash cymbal. I need something big. And so I always fly. And I'm super loyal. Like, I want them for the pictures. So if we're flying to South America.
That's a good point. And
we're playing in front of 50,000 people. I want to make sure that my stuff's up there, because you hate if there's a killer shot of the crowd and it's like, well, this isn't my stuff. No company's going to use it. Like, I mean, even as a kid, I just thought about that kind of branding and stuff. So I'm just super loyal. I'm always like, they got to have what I have, or I'm going to fly with it. So I fly with the snare and cymbals, and that's usually it.
It's interesting with the cymbals too, because like that's a lot of. I always think of cymbals as spice, so it's like it's when you don't fly with your spices, it can be a bit of a thing. It's funny you call a 16-inch crash a splash, because I'm the same boat. Things the cymbals just keep getting bigger and bigger, but
right. And one of the biggest things I'll say to guys and girls who play, if you're going to fly your gear or tour, you should insure your gear. It's not expensive.
Yes.
And airlines break stuff, airlines lose stuff, and your trailer gets broken. Stuff happens. And I will tell you, I started insuring all my gear maybe 10 years ago, not that long ago, maybe 8 or 10. And I've had some claims, and there's companies that are so good about it, and it makes all the difference, because you feel like you can fly and you can travel. I wouldn't take something super rare. I wouldn't take my Tama Bell brass on a flight.
Can't
because
replace
it's
it. Don't take it on tour. Yeah.
But if it's standard modern stuff, you can always replace it. So just insure it. It's very low income to do it.
That's very good advice. I feel like we've got a lot of value already.
Yeah.
I want to say too, with the endorsements, because that's one of those things where pro players across the board, they say, like, if you're touring, that's a higher profile gig. So like that helps, because the people there see it. But they say, like, once you get one, it's kind of easier to get the second one. And it's easier for to snowball into other, because as you're saying, the reps seem to know each other. They probably know each other from trade shows, from like NAMM and stuff like that. So if you're good, and you're a good person,
it's totally a relationship, because sometimes they're looking for good players, sometimes they're looking for high profile, sometimes they're looking for social media, 1 million followers. Like, there's just different scenarios of what they're looking for, but you can never go wrong trying to be a good person and be loyal. But they want to know you love the product. So if you've spent your whole life playing Zildjian, don't go to Paiste and say, hey, give me a deal. Because everybody's on social media. You can look back and see, well, this guy or girl has never even played our product. Why should we believe that they believe in us? So I think there's something to be said for companies love loyalty. They don't want the big name that's just going to bounce tomorrow, usually.
No, it's all great advice. There was another thing that you sparked when talking about the pictures from live, because I've done some tours where we've been sharing kits here and there, or drummers or bands have jumped onto these some of these gigs and they haven't had their kit and there's no backline for them, so we end up sharing a kit. You did a stint with Manifest.
I did, yeah. Canadian.
Yeah. We did a tour with them a couple of years ago, and their drummer, he asked beforehand if he could, if it was Manifest and Adelaide's Way, if he could share the kit. I'm like, yeah, it's all good. But he brought like a kick drum skin, like just without the hoop on it. That was like a sticker that he could just put over mine. And I was like, that is smart, because now you're not up there playing like another band's kit. And so like I've always traveled with like even just a blank black one, so that if we are sharing a kit, and it's like when drummers put that together and said, oh, now our pictures aren't ruined. Like I should have got our bands, because you can travel with that, because they roll up, like they're easy to tour with. But just the idea of like not messing up your pictures live, and you're saying too with the cymbals, and because you never know what the angle's going to be. Too, if someone's taking a picture with your Evans Drumheads, you might not think that it's going to make a difference, but it's like, I still like for live, I still like white drum skins, because I think like it for me, it looks cool, and I can mark them up after and stuff like that. But no, it's just, bands need to think about that. Think about the pictures.
It's just part of your branding. And I like the consistency. I love people to know, like, doesn't matter if you love or hate my playing or love and hate my brands. I want guys or girls, when they think of me and drumming, go, oh, he's DW, he's Evans, he's pro, like he's been with these companies forever, because it helps your brand stick to, you're not like jumping around all the time. So I get we're going a little heavy in the endorsements, and it's not like huge.
I think it's interesting, because it's a question a lot of people have about that stuff, but I think it goes deeper with you as an artist, and you're recognizing like the overall picture. With how you present yourself, not just as a musician, but also your tools of the trade, like your instrument. Like if Angus Young was playing, a Stratocaster, when he's not playing his 68 SG, it would look really weird on stage. You're like, no, like, where is this guitar? Or Slash was playing, Iceman or something. You'd be like, this is really weird. But it's just like, for drummers, you don't think about that all the time, because some people think drums are drums, but it's like, no, like it's your instrument.
Right.
You know, it's a part of who you are. Sorry. Yeah. Again, it's endorsement talk for a bit, but
one last thing I want to say
Yeah.
about endorsements. This is really important. People ask me about endorsements all the time. You have to think what makes you marketable, because a company's not just out there to give stuff away or to give you a discount. Like, what are you doing to help a company? Why are they going to want to put their name on you? What are you doing to push the product? So don't be fake about it. Don't be cheesy, but just people know you for something. You know, I want my drum students to know this is what I play, because I can influence them, because they're in my life. I want people who come to shows to know if they're a drummer. Most people don't care, but if you're a drummer, I want you to care about that. So you just got to think, what makes, how can I help a company? My goal is always like, how can I help a company sell product? And then they're going to be like, man, we need this guy. That's the part that I wish young students and people would be like, I just want free stuff. That's not really how the world works today. So you can't go into it like that. Yeah.
No, yeah, it's again the value you can bring to the company as well. It is a two-way street.
Yeah.
Just thinking, let's hop back. What inspired you to get into drums, start playing drums?
Man, I started in middle school, so later than a lot of my current drum students, and I got a drum set then and started playing in my church. And I'm a pastor's kid, and so I was like the first drummer really to play at the church at that point, and just a kid, but I was playing every week with all adults, and they were better musicians than me. And I mean, it was probably awful for them, but they're still dear friends, most of them. And so we joke about the early years when I was like, all I could do was play 2 beats and 1 fill, and we get to every chorus, but at the same time, like, that was part of my process. And then in high school, I started taking lessons. I grew up in Wisconsin, and there was a cool drum store in Madison that was a 5-star drum shop. So I started taking lessons there. And so kind of my junior and senior year of high school, I was more serious. And then I had a high school band with some buddies. And I mean, we did an album, which was, in this day, you had to go to a legit studio. You had to pay money to have an album done. We were pressing our own CDs. And so that was a great experience of like recording original music. We didn't have laptops. You couldn't do it at home. It wasn't like today where every kid can make an album. And so that was a great experience. And then really when I got serious was at the end of high school. I had kind of an accident, not even an accident. I had a bone disease that ended my sports career. I was hoping to play sports in college, and it's my kick drum leg. So I had a total knee transplant of a bone cadaver. So crazy I guess I was 16. And so I was like, man, I can't do sports anymore. I guess I'll go to music college, go to school for drums. So I started looking around, and Belmont University in Nashville really appealed to me because it was small and it was a Christian school, but you could study music, you could study drum set. And the main drum teacher was Chester Thompson. And he was known for, like, he's been with Phil Collins 30 years, and he was with Genesis and Frank Zappa and Weather Report. Well, I ended up getting accepted there. So at 18, I packed up, moved to Nashville, started my degree there. I was there almost 5 years to graduate. Tons of life experience, tons of like, you're pretty good from a small town. A lot of kids are, and they get to Nashville and you realize, wow, this is not what I expected. I'm not good at all. The real world is, and you're not even seeing the real world. You're just seeing like sophomores and juniors who are way better than you. And so that was the first big wake up call moving to Nashville. And then I started to get to know people and adapt. And right after college, kind of moving on to how I got into Amber Pacific, that was the punk band. I was playing at a church randomly, and I mean, I always played there, but a guy came up who was visiting, and he's now a longtime friend, but he said, hey, this band just signed a deal in Seattle. They're going to be on the Warped Tour. Maybe you should go try out. You might want to do it. And I didn't even have tattoos then, and I was like dreaming of being in a punk band. So I was shocked that he literally walked up and said that. So I contacted them. I flew up an audition. I was 24, and I packed my stuff. I got the gig, and I moved across the country. Didn't know anybody. Moved to Seattle at 24, and then I lived there the next 8 years, and we did 4 years straight on the Warped Tour, and we did, all over the U.S. countless times, and put out 4 albums in the last, since then. But most of my cool life experiences early on were with that band, and that was a huge transition into, my professional career before moving back to Nashville. But eventually moved back here because I was like, I want to be a hired gun. The band has slowed down. all the guys wanted to get normal jobs, and I was the only one who said, I need to keep playing drums. This is all I know. This is what I've studied. I can play and teach, but I couldn't do it in Seattle. There just weren't a lot of gigs. There weren't a lot of people touring. And I had a lot of friends here still in Nashville, so I thought if I go back, I can get into country, I can get into rock, I can get into the contemporary Christian, I can kind of get into all that stuff. So that's been the journey the last 8 years or so that I've been back here.
You just gave me so much to unpack there.
I did. I'm sorry. It's a lot.
just to scoot back to the beginnings of playing with the church and the gospel stuff. Like I did want to touch on that because like in our circles we have a term for gospel chops, and it's like drummers have gospel chops, the way that the fills are, and just the bag of tricks that they have for performing. But the idea of playing with the church or playing, was it just right place, right time, or did you kind of spot it and say like, I want to play in the band, I don't care what I'm playing, or like I want to play the drums? Or
I think for me it was really I was drawn to the drums, and I just as a kid thought they were cool, and I thought that would be a fun thing to play. So I joined the middle school band as well, and they had a drum set. And I could sit down and play one beat. But you know, when you're in concert band, it's like you're playing snare and timpani and the bass drum and, you know, crash cymbals like this. So it wasn't like anything really cool. But the church was the great opportunity, because when I look back, besides loving, you know, what it's about and what it stands for, I played every service from 7th grade till I graduated high school, which I mean, in that amount of time, I probably played like 1,000 services where I had live time on stage playing real music with real humans. And that's where I didn't have the chops or the studying that a lot of kids have that grow up watching YouTube. But a lot of kids now don't get to play live gigs and don't get out. And so you can't replace the playing with people and how much it helps your pocket, how much it helps your feel as a drummer, any musician really. And so that was what was such a huge part of playing in that kind of a band for me. Learning arrangements, learning how to think of song structure, learning how to think the kick drum needs to play the same thing the whole verse. I remember the first time this adult bass player who's a dear friend told me that, and I was just, kid playing do do cat do, just playing like some
just
crazy kick pattern. Yeah. But I swear every drum student, I forget they don't know that, and they sit down and show me something cool. I'm like, all right, dumb it down, just play do do do. They can't do it for 8 bars or 16 bars without changing it. So I learned that early as a kid. That was one of my strengths, was playing with people and playing consistent, because I didn't learn a bunch of chops and cool stuff as a kid.
It's so tempting as a drummer to just play what you think is cool and not listen.
Yeah.
And it's like really good teachers and mentors, I think that's what they do. They encourage you to slow down and listen to what's going on. How is what I'm doing fit in with everybody else is what they're doing? I gotta say, the idea of like, if you're playing those services, like, what you said between grade 7 and 12, so like a good 5 years, that's a lot of shows, because most people, like most musicians, say, how many shows did you play between grade 7 and grade 12? They're like, maybe 5. But we both know, like, I think you'd agree, one of the quickest ways to get better at your instrument is to go on stage and suck.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to do that. You can suck all day when you're practicing the rehearsal space or at home or whatever. But if you get on stage and lay an egg on there and you're just like, I don't want to feel like that again. So I can only imagine being that, and that young too, because like there's a lot more pressure when you're young, I think. So,
and it was a different world, because there wasn't tracks then, and we weren't playing to a click. It wasn't the cool modern thing it is today, but it was still tough arrangements, and you're still playing with a band, and we played exact parts and trying to get it down, and you still, like, I dropped sticks and had to deal with all the normal stuff. So
yeah,
it was a good experience.
Is a lot of it sight reading, or
no? Everything was memorized, and that's how I did it then. And just to touch on the genre, you mentioned gospel chops, which are amazing. I do not have those. I wish I did. I try.
Oh,
what I grew up doing in the church. No. What I grew up doing in the church was more like, we call it like the modern rock worship sound. So it's more the stuff that's straight ahead and big choruses. It's all like power ballads, which is why I feel like one of my best strengths is playing power ballads, because that's what I really grew up. And I feel like that's why I play the Creed music so well, because I'm good at not overdoing it. And I just think of these huge fills and try to think like, what would you do in Guns N' Roses? What would you do in like these big anthems? That's how I try to think as a player. And so the punk stuff, I tried to get into chops, and that's probably the fastest and coolest stuff I did drum wise. But I don't know, the older I get, the more I'm like, I remember guys, older teachers being like, the older you get, the more you play, the more you're going to realize you need to leave space and play less and less.
That's
now,
true.
especially recording all the time, I'll play something, I'll listen back, and it fits, and it's in the pocket, and it's on the click, and I'm like, it's too much. That doesn't fit in a pop song, or it doesn't fit in a country song. So I'm always taking stuff out. And granted, in the day of chops, I'm not saying I have chops, because there's 8-year-olds that can play circles around me, but
You got chops.
but I'm always trying to be better and better at, like, how can I make it groove and play something simple? Like, what is a fill? I once heard Dave Grohl say, play a fill that everybody wants to air drum. And I thought, that's brilliant. Like, play something that makes the whole room want to, just go crazy. So I don't always do that, but that's the goal.
No, that's a great way of looking at it too. Play a fill that everyone can air drum, because like you mentioned, your one of your mentors and instructors early on is the drummer for Phil Collins.
Yeah.
Who has one of the most famous drum fills of all time.
Right.
So
right. And if you watch him do that, Chester, they would do a drum duet live, like for the last 20 years as well. But they would, when they would play in the air tonight, Phil would go back to the drums and play it, and they do the fill synced up. And so if you watch footage of it, it's really cool. Cool to see.
Thank you for not mouth drumming the rest of that drum fill, so
right.
YouTube doesn't give us a copyright strike, because I'm pretty sure they would figure that one out.
Right. That's how iconic it is.
It is. YouTube would probably flag it and say like, nope, that sounds like that song. So let's skip ahead a little bit. So you end up in Seattle with Amber Pacific. What was your introduction to that band like?
It was early on. It was hard. And again, these guys are now like some of my best friends, even though I don't see them all the time. And last year, right before the pandemic, we played our 15th anniversary. So that's just saying I've got history with these dudes. They're dear, dear friends now. But early on, I just finished college, and they'd all just finished high school. And they were like kids in the band who got signed. They sent in a demo, got signed on that without playing a live show for the label. Like, that never happens even back then. And we signed to Hopeless Records, which at the time, Avenged Sevenfold and Thrice were from there. So it was a legit underground, like, for being an indie label, it had a lot of street cred. And so I just remember we went on our first Warped Tour, 2004, learning to live together. We bought an RV, and we're fortunate to not have to tour in a van, which is crazy. We started an RV. A friend of mine put custom bunks in the back for us. And then, basically we're like kids touring all over the country. And Warped Tour is brutal. I mean, I love it. It's the greatest tour I've ever done, but it's the hardest tour because it's 12-hour days in the heat. You have super long drives. Most of them aren't close together. We went up all through Canada as well as the US, and it's so rewarding because you see the physical growth of your band. I remember putting out the first album, and we would sell 100 CDs a day to kids, and the records, the label's like, how are you putting out these numbers? But it's because we stood out there all day long. First summer, we averaged 115 albums a day, I think. But our whole band would stand at the table. We'd all sign the CDs, and we'd all say, hey, do you want to listen? We'd have a little Walkman, Discman, headphones. We'd have to replace them every few weeks because they'd break, but we'd say, come listen to a song, and people didn't know us, and then they would buy our albums. And then, as we grew, Warped Tour would put us on their compilations. We started doing music videos, and back in the day we had some videos on MTV when that was still a thing, and on Fuse TV. It was huge in that era, so we were always in school cafeterias and in stuff like that. And I mean, some of the cool memories besides your videos on TV were walking into Hot Topic. Our CDs would be on the end cap. When a new album came out, you could walk in and see it. We had Amber Pacific shirts on the wall. So I'm not saying we were huge at all, but we got to do so many cool things that were childhood dreams of wow, I can't believe as a band, songs would be in movies and TV shows, video games, soundtracks. I mean, just a lot of cool stuff. So it started rough, but then I'd say by our second, even by the end of our first Warped Tour, we were super tight just based on you're playing every day. And you get really good. All those bands, I mean, I don't talk to a lot of them, but if I see somebody in passing, I'll just played a festival with Rise Against last year. I hadn't seen them since Warped Tour, and I'm a huge fan. And I went and met him, and I was like, hey, I'm in this band, Amber Pacific, back in the day. You probably don't remember me because I play with the Creed guy now. And they're like, oh, yeah, Amber Pacific, Warped Tour. You guys were always out selling your CDs. And it was there's just this mutual respect in the punk world if you've done that tour, because people know you've got to be good at getting your gear on and off stage. You've got to be good at 30-minute set, super fast changeover. You just get good at that kind of stuff. So that was really good for my just developing me as learning to work with people, learning to be on the road. We'd be gone for really long periods back then because you're kids, nobody's married, nobody has kids. You can tour 6 months straight and it's okay. So yeah, I have such fond memories of like the early days in the RV.
You bringing up Warped Tour and just the grind it is. My guest last week, Phoenix Arnhorn, drummer for Courage My Love, because they've done Warped Tour a couple of times, and not last year, but the year before, and just the weather, just how hot, because it was like signs were melting. In 2019, it was so hot, and everyone's got sunstroke, and Phoenix was just like, you learn how to tour when you do Warped Tour, because there's the margin for error is small because of health and because of the grind from the drives. And you're saying too, this, with a band being at merch and even you talking about having headphones so people can listen. Like, I don't know how many bands are doing that, but there's probably a line in the sand between a band that has that kind of hustle and foresight of being like, people need to hear the music, and the ones that just kind of hope. Hope that people see your band or hope you can come check it out. But just like the hustle that you need to make the most of that opportunity, but also just to survive it, because there's probably 40, 50 bands. Like there's probably a lot.
Yeah. I mean, some days there was 100. I mean, when it was in its prime, 05, 06, 07, it was like, it'd be a zillion bands, 10 and 12 stages. I mean, it was a lot.
Yeah. So it's like to be able to be heard above that noise, like the amount of hustle that you need. And I'm of the thought too, like you get good on stage, but I do think your band really gels and gets good when you go tour. Once you realize that it's kind of, your band against the world at that point, because like that's your family now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Things are
it's
good,
like brotherhood.
things are bad. Yeah. There's a it was messed the word up with that camaraderie, where like when you're out with people, and it's like touring is different. Once you pull away from where you live or leave your hometown, it is, the 2, 3, 4, 5 or whatever. It's just you, because things are going to be good and things are not going to be good sometimes. And like, that's your bubble now. I wanted to ask, like, when your first tour, what was going through your head? It was moments of like, what am I doing here? Or like, this is awesome. Or like, I didn't sign up for this. Or
we affectionately called it the dive tour for years after that, because our first tour was us and one other band, and they weren't signed. And we played we played every crappy venue on that tour. All of them were crappy. Those first couple of years, I probably played every dive bar in the US, more or less. I mean, we played in 48 states. We played everywhere. And it's rough. Some nights you get there and you don't get paid, and some nights something doesn't work out and you're just hustling for gas, and you might sell some merch. Your sound check's terrible, the gear's broken, whatever. And that happens. I feel like it's such a good experience, and everybody should have that if you have a chance to, because it develops your character, it builds brotherhood. You have the family, the community. We'd do this thing on the road where we'd have to say, and I kind of came up with it on the road, but every day on that sucky tour, we'd go, what are you thankful for today? And everybody had to say one thing, and it was just try to remind us, like, hey, we're living the dream, kind of. Even though this sucks, we believe, like, it's our music. We have a shot. We could make it. You never know. And that's the fun of doing your own stuff. Because I've been a hired gun for the last 8 years. I'm not on these albums. I'm not, I'm playing other people's stuff, and I'm basically an employee, which is great. I love both. But it's so different. Band world, you're totally invested. Like, I'm part of everything. I'm on the posters. I played on the record. If we lose, I'm out the money. If we break down, I'm out the money. If the band, if the RV, yeah. So it is really rewarding when it's your own stuff and you feel like you start to see it grow and people get into it.
For any venues that may be listening, what are some qualities and characteristics that would make a venue less than desirable for a touring band?
I mean, so much is obvious, but if you're at a crappy level, and if you could smoke in a venue, I think it's just awful, because I'm super allergic to smoke. And in this day and age, you shouldn't be able to smoke in a bar. Like, still, I play casinos now, and you can smoke in casinos still. It blows my mind.
I will say, because like in Canada, it's like smoking indoors is like not a thing.
Yeah.
Like some casinos still have like certain sections, but even then their HVAC is insane. So like it just goes straight up and you really don't notice it until you like go by. But I remember a couple of years ago, I can't remember exactly where we were. But like everyone was lighting up in there. And I thought it was so weird because sometimes in venues, like staff and stuff will smoke before and after, like doors are open and closed and stuff. But I started thinking, I'm like, this is part personal opinion and also part, touring musician opinion. I'm like, this is really gross because now all of our merch stinks.
Yeah.
All of our t-shirts, all of our everything after. And it's like, I didn't know what to do. Cause I would get on, I get on people all the time with the drinks at merch table. Cause all it takes is one drink getting knocked over at merch table and you're either out money or you're out time or both. And I remember putting our stuff away and just thinking, cause like you can smell it on yourself. And again, people are out having a good time and it's what it is. But I remember all of our merch smelled and I didn't know what to do. Cause it's like, it's gross.
It happens. I remember pulling drums out of cases at the end of tour and being like, these drums smell like smoke and I don't smoke and our trailer doesn't have smoke in it. They spend more time in the trailer, but they sit in venues long enough. It's definitely part of it. So when you ask me about the venues, what's funny is it's much easier to remember the good venues because they're few and far between. So like any House of Blues I love playing, and 930 Club and the Norva in Norfolk, Virginia. But 930 Club in DC, like there's just rock clubs and country clubs. There's some really cool country bars, and a lot of the Toby Keith bars are nice. But you remember those because they're clean and they have nice bathrooms and they have green rooms and they've got good catering. But I mean, I've played more than hundreds, probably over 1,000, probably thousands of dives that are just, you don't remember or you wish you didn't, or you wish you didn't have to go back.
Yeah, no, it's funny not to keep going down that path with some of those venues, but you mentioned the idea of like, bands need to go and do this. Like there is, I think there is a rite of passage playing some of these venues because like, if you don't really want to do it, because I think sometimes playing your hometown, like if you can be a bigger fish in a small pond and think you're hot stuff and then go tour, and before you're playing to, 200 or 300 people in your hometown, and then you go to play to 3 people that know your band and love your music, but it's like 3 people does not fill a venue very well. Right. And for some bands, like that's enough to hit the ego where you're just like, I don't know if I want to do this. So I think there is something there mentally for bands to go do. And I'm sure you've heard it too, where like bands can fall apart when they do one of those dive tours. Oh
yeah. People usually want to quit, or somebody leaves, or you change a member or whatever. Super normal. We saw it all the time. I mean, it happened to us at times, but I will say one of the best things about touring, any young band or new band should tour, because you can be a great band in the studio, you can record a good album, and obviously with recording you can make it sound like anything nowadays. But if you play monthly at a home show, you're going to be pretty good. If you go out and play every night, your band is going to sound like a real band. And there's such a difference between bands who are polished because they play all the time versus, hey, we're really good musicians and we got together and we learned a set. And I mean, I live in Nashville with some of the best players in the world that do that. And so I'm not knocking that. That's totally a skill set. Here's a charts the night before. I learned 10 songs. I'm going to play them tomorrow. That's a cool thing. And that's totally different skill set. But you can't sound like, even with the greatest players in the world, it doesn't sound like the Foo Fighters, because the Foo Fighters played together for years, or any long-standing band. And that's the thing that's so cool about music, is like one of the many things, but like a band sounds like a band, whereas hired guns or great players or people who are jamming, they just aren't going to have that kind of gel. They could be much better musicians. They could be Vinnie Colaiuta. They could be, virtuoso players, but there's still something cool about like the chemistry of a band that's just done it every night in a row for the last 6 months. Like that's a special thing. So that's what I really am saying.
No, you nailed it. It's just like that night after night, throwing that set down. Another one of those things with bands. We're like, oh, we just kind of, we figure out our set before the show. I'm just like, wow.
Yeah.
Like there's some bands that can do that. I say 99% are not. It's like you want to make sure that flow, how the show actually feels and stuff. So I've seen bands go on tour and do that, and they come home and like they didn't learn anything, because like you're saying, it's like you send a band out. If you go out for like 6 weeks, and you do 40 shows or something like that, it's like that's a lot. So you go for 6 weeks, you do 30 shows. You come home, you come home. It's like that first show and that 30th show. If you were to watch both of them back to back, you'd be like, 30th is way better. It's just smooth. It's smoother. People are more comfortable. There's a sense of looseness to it too, where people know what's going on. It's just like, again, filming your shows when you're on tour and stuff too. There's so many rookie things where you're just like, you don't get that time back. You don't get that time to watch that show again, or to talk about the show in a constructive way after. Again, bands that, bands that don't really go the distance after those dive tours, because everyone starts pointing fingers. If they're not pointing fingers at themselves, they're pointing a finger at whoever booked it, or whatever. It's just like, no, like this is where we start. So
yeah, for sure. And there was times, as a band, we were mad at management or booking or ourselves. And early on, like, I was kind of a music school Nazi coming out of Belmont, of like, I'm going to be the guy that gets our show tight and is really hard on everybody. And I was too hard on guys, and I've apologized years later. Like, I'm sorry, I was kind of a dick in the early years. I was so intense about don't miss this, don't miss this. And we were one of those bands jumping around. Like, we were from that era where, Green Day and Blink-182 and all those bands where you wanted to put on this show. So it wasn't like you stood still and played fast. It was like you jumped every time everybody stopped. You did synchronized stuff. And so it's like we were doing all that and trying to hit the right notes. It's a lot to do at once. And we were playing at 200 BPM on some of those songs. So, I started watching footage from the early tours, and a buddy was filling in on guitar, and he said, "Why don't you play to a click live?" I was like, "Nobody does in punk. It's too fast," which in my defense is true. Nobody does. But I was like, I need to do that. So after our second album, which was, I think, our best album, I started playing to a click live, and a handful of the songs were over 200, and they were. I just remember one of the highlights of my personal career was Brooks Wackerman, who is now in Avenged Sevenfold. He was in Bad Religion forever, one of my favorite drummers. He stood behind me on stage and watched me, and several like my drumming icons did in Warped Tour. And I just remember talking to him after the set, and he's like, "Man, your timing is just so solid." And I said, "Well, I'm on a click." He goes, "What? You're on a click for that fast stuff? Nobody does that." And it meant so much to me, because like, this is Brooks. So I just remember thinking, the click is a cool thing. Obviously, it's not for everybody, but it makes your live band thing so much tighter. And now kids are 10 and 12, and they're playing to a click and tracks. So it's a different game. You go tour now, and everybody's used to tracks. But in my day, being an old guy, it was not the case. I don't know if you guys were on tracks when you were touring, but
oh yeah, no, I've been running tracks for years now, and the main thing though was the click. And one of the producers I learned from, one of the mentors, he didn't have like the standard metronome, like just the beep or just the wood block or whatever. He would make like an actual rhythm, like an actual like cool shaker tambourine rhythm, because he's like, it's one thing to be on the line, like to walk the tightrope, but it's another thing to actually know where the lane is, and to be actually like know, so that you don't feel guilty if you fall off a little bit. It's like, where the groove is. And believe it or not, there's still some drummers that fight back about playing to a click even in the studio. And I'm like, well, no, it's a sense of consistency for everybody, but when we're touring, and I'm sure you agree, some days you have more energy than others. So
I love when I started playing with Scott, the Creed guy. I said, "Hey, are we going to run click live?" He goes, "I don't know. Creed's never used click. You can do whatever you want." And I love this conversation thinking back. And I said, I am not going to get on a stage and like dishonor your music and not keep it together. So I said, if you're okay with it, I am playing with a click 100% of the time, because these Creed hits are massive. And I don't want to be the guy that gets super excited and starts higher or arms wide open, like 20 BPM off. And Creed was played notoriously fast, but I was like, that's them. They're the band. They can do whatever. We're the hired guns. We're going to make it sound like the record. So I will say, yeah, we're click for everything. And then his newest record, we had tracks as well, which was a new thing for him. So I run those in the back, and I'm not Mr. Track guy, but our setup is basic as far as what we run. But man, all the Creed stuff, it's just click and live. And that's one thing I love, because not many rock bands we play with or play festivals with are legitimately no tracks on their hits. So we're playing these anthems like, hey, that's a real band. You're hearing real drums and guitar, and not hearing 25 backing vocal tracks and 18 guitars, which is, what a lot of the stuff is today. And I get that's modern music, but there's something to be said for the street cred of like, that's a real band up there.
No, it is good. I'm of the thought with tracks, it's like, it's not a crutch. If you hit stop, because like, what it's like when something does a hiccup or something with the tracks and you got to stop them. If you can just kind of keep going and you don't feel like everything fell apart, that's okay. But we both probably heard bands before where something's happened with their tracks, and you're just like, wow, that's the band. That's it's not the tracks.
It's so scary on stage too. My first real tour with tracks was Red, and they have really complex tracks, and there's huge sound, and they sound good live. But I remember they were running two laptops, and there's a backup if it crashes. And we were in the middle of a show, and the tracks like jumped, like it hiccuped or something. And this was Ableton.
Yeah.
I don't know how it did it. And they all turned and looked at me, and I was like, guys, it's not my fault. And I'm sure it had happened before. But I had to stop the tracks, and you finish the song, and it's whatever. Most fans don't notice, and we had a great front of house guy, and they can usually balance the mix, so you don't have to deal with that. But one other band, Scarlet White, that are mutual acquaintances, I remember the tour I filled in with them. They were opening for Fireflight, who I was playing with, and I'll never forget the third or fourth show early on in the tour. They had their laptop of tracks, and I was playing, and the drum riser was bouncing, and the laptop just went up in the air, and my heart just sunk, and the laptop crashed behind the stage, ripped out the cables, unplugged, and we finished the song, and I'm just like, these guys are going to hate me. They barely know me. It's only my second show or whatever with them. And they turned around. I was like, guys, I need a minute. They were ready to go to the next song. Nobody in the band noticed that the tracks had stopped except me. And so the band didn't hear it, and they're like, but you kept playing. I was like, well, of course I did. I'm a professional. What did you think I was going to do?
You can't stop.
But they were just like, we assumed everything was fine because you sounded just like normal. And so it was cool, and it was very, like, it was just meant a lot to me to think, like, I guess I did keep it together. I didn't slow down. And they were just like, our old drummer would have just stopped, and we'd have had to start the song over. And I was like, no,
No,
there will be no starting the song over.
No.
I was like, your people don't even know the music out there. They are not going to notice that there was no tracks. We're fine.
Yeah.
So
and again, it's like if your tracks are that heavy and they stop and everybody notices, that's a bit of a red flag that there's a thing going on there.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I just want to say the click thing again, just back to it, because it's just like you have high energy some days, you're a bit dragging other days, and especially live, like it just makes it consistent. And also for any bands out there, if you want to take some live footage and cut it against your songs and you got the same BPM, you're in good shape. I wanted to backtrack a little bit because you mentioned being hard on other band members with their performances for live, and we need to play everything to a certain point. You mentioned before, you were into sports. What was your sport? I'm going somewhere with this. What was your sport?
Yeah, all through high school, I did baseball, and I did basketball, and I did cross country. And I'm a small kid, and I probably couldn't have made it past college. But my junior year, I was 9th at state in cross country. I knew I could run at a school. And baseball, my junior year, like I was the MVP of our conference and pitched a no-hitter, and baseball was like my love. I love basketball too. I'm just too small at the end of the day. So I think I could have potentially played baseball somewhere. Maybe not, but that was the dream. So sports were always the thing, and then music was always like second to that. And then when the sports thing ended my senior year, I was like, all right, it looks like music's my option. Let's get serious and see, could I really play drums? So again, small town, but sports were great because they build the team atmosphere, and they build the idea of like, this isn't one person, this is everybody together to make whatever it is succeed.
What I want is I did want to hear about the sports in particular because I am a sports person, but also just the idea of just like when you in sports, you've seen someone go off on somebody for making the wrong play, doing like messing something up. No one ever wants to not make the play. Everyone's always like, I'm here to try to make the play. Like I'm practicing to try to make the play. And that's kind of been that's been my mindset with live. It's like, it's not to say it's okay to make mistakes, but it's okay to understand that things rarely go just perfect. Right. Like sometimes we have that moment where like we're in the zone and everything's just working. But in sports, it's just like, you can practice the same, football, you can practice the same play over and over and over again, but it's different when you're in the game.
And it's going to go different every time. Yeah. There's always outside factors.
The variables. And that's one of the things with some bands, they get off stage and they're just like, head and hands are just like, oh, that was terrible. It's terrible. I'm just like, what happened? And they can name like one thing that didn't go well. And I'm like, I didn't notice. Fans didn't notice. I know 3/5 of your band didn't notice. It's like, it's okay. So like, what was, to bring it back to it? Like, was there like a moment where you're just like, wait a second, like we're doing good. Like, we're all in this.
Well, in fairness, the band Amber Pacific was rough in the early days because nobody had toured and it just was a different level of playing. So I regret it was too hard on everybody early on, but that was sort of like my role in the band, was to try to be the guy that helped with that. Like, everybody had their strengths, and I wasn't the guy writing lyrics. And I wasn't the guy. I was really big on arranging our songs. I helped with all of that on our records and coming up with cool endings and outros and intros and bridges. But I was always the guy, like, we got to execute. It's got to be clean. It's got to be smooth. It's got to be super tight. So I don't know why I'm wired that way. I just am. I'm harder on myself than anybody else, and I still am. And so I just beat myself up. But it's also, I mean, I've mellowed over the years, but that's the one thing I think is strong about my playing. I won't say I'm a great drummer. I won't say I'm an amazing drummer, but I'm consistent night after night. And that's the thing I try to be, so that a singer, an artist, a band can rely on me and go, you know, this guy doesn't mess up. He's really consistent. He's always on time. He doesn't get wasted. Like, that's why I think I'm hireable. I think I can do a good job. Like, I'll learn the set. I'm going to play it the same every night, and you're never going to have to question, is the drummer going to mess up? It doesn't mean I won't, but generally 99% of the time, like, that's how I play. There's always guys faster. There's always guys with more chops. There's always guys with a better drum solo and all that kind of stuff. But I think what I can be good at is super reliable. So every day you get the same thing. If you hire me, I'll be there. And that, I think, came from years of touring and just being like, I got to be super solid because I'm never going to be the best. So be the best me I can be. And that's, you know, that's what you get with me.
You mentioned being that person in the band that kind of keeps tabs on the arrangements and stuff. Bands need a music director of some sort. They need someone like that. Is a job duty to kind of, I think everyone can kind of police themselves, but for someone to like really listen and, you know, blessing and curse, drummers are usually listening to everybody that's going on, because we're not worrying about notes as much as we are worrying about just making sure the groove's there. But it's important to have somebody who you trust with the opinion there. Like, I don't think you're ever sitting there being like, well, I'm going to make everyone feel bad today. That's not going to help the team.
Yeah. And in fairness, now that I'm in Nashville and doing artist gigs, it's totally different. And there's band leaders on every gig, and some of them are so good and listen to so many parts, and they're cueing the tracks as well as talking to everybody on the talkback mics. And like, it's a different world. My experience was more like I was in the band. So I was a part of, you know, even as we're doing these records, coming up with stuff and suggesting, what if we did this with a guitar part or bass part or whatever, or vocal part? So I do try to think big picture, but I've had to change my mindset so much, because you get playing for an artist and live, you can't go, what if we did this transition? What if we did this? And what if we did this? Because when you're playing for an artist, it's their thing. So you're like, I'm here to support that. If you ask my opinion, I'll give it, but I'm not just going to be like piping in with a bunch of stuff, because that'll get you fired from a lot of people if you're not a member. You know, you're there to support what they're doing. So I've changed my spin being in Nashville for sure.
Just want to pull a quick comment in here from YouTube. Amanda's saying, remember, you are always your own worst critic.
Yes, I am.
I think there's a lot of truth in that. I want to ask you, do you have perfect shows? Do you have performances you're like, I nailed all of this tonight?
Perfect is relative, especially playing drums with notes. But I would say that, like, if I've toured with somebody for a long time, I definitely have shows where I don't feel like I missed any fills or dropped a stick or missed a kick hit or something. I still have all those, you know, I do a lot of tossing of sticks and stuff. So I'll still have stuff happen. But I would say I have shows where I feel like I 95% nailed that. And it was really, which when you think how many times you're hitting a drum in a live show, like, that's hard to do. So yes, I would say kind of. Nothing's perfect. And that's why it's music as well. You know, it's not, my time is not perfect. It's always moving up and down and whatever. But yes, I've had several shows where I don't feel like I messed up anything.
No, that was one of my things to calm musicians. Sometimes I say, you know what? Like, how many things did you think, you know, that you missed or whatever? And I'm like, if you can count, you know, maybe 3, maybe 5, I think that's pretty good for 45 minutes on stage. Because in the studio, we hit stop and re-record something all the time. You can't do that live. Yeah, because if you only got 5 chances to stop something in Pro Tools or Logic, like, that'd be a different thing.
Yeah, no joke.
But yeah, live, it's just like, you know, you let that stuff go, and also it's just knowing how to roll with that, you know, when you're performing live, like, not let it get to you, sort of thing.
That is really something about being professional, is being able to mess up and keep going, because I still mess up all the time. And it doesn't mean you make the same mistake twice like jazz. Sometimes you do. If I hit a weird snare hit, I might hit it again in 2 bars, but
Just jazz
it's
it.
more like, yeah, if you mess up, the audience doesn't notice. If you can be professional, I am just like, I can be a cold face on stage with no emotion. And that way, when I do mess up, you look at me and the band will be like, did he mess up? I'm like, I don't know. Does my face look like I did? So that's something I really always try to do. And when I'm playing in town, I've got, such close friends I play gigs with in town. If we mess up, if we're playing a 4-hour gig, you can't play a perfect 4-hour gig. And so if we mess up something stupid, we usually joke with each other and we point at ourselves and go, yep, that was me. So we do that in that setting. But like if you're doing if you can just keep going and you mess up, that's so much about being professional. And music is it's this art that's not perfect. So keep going. It's music. It's okay. If you hit a weird chord, if you hit a wrong note, if you go slightly out of time, jump back in. The song goes on, the show goes on. People forget in 5 minutes that it happened. So that's a good thing to notice. Don't stop everything. So many kids, not just kids, so many new players have this panic attack and sort of freak out. And it's like, man, nobody knows. Keep going. You're getting, just like you're talking about, people beat themselves up later. But if you messed up 3 times in a 45-minute set, you really are doing pretty well.
No, I'd say the idea of just keep going. It's like, that's the one thing for drummers. It's just like a lot has to happen. A lot has to happen to put it in the weeds for a band to like train wreck and to stop sort of thing. Cause I would rather hear a band kind of like, not say flounder, but just kind of wall around for a second to figure out where, put the wheel back on. Okay, we're good. But a lot of things have to go wrong to really need to stop playing when you are playing live. And again, as you've said it a bunch of times, it's like the crowd sees a different show. They're not seeing some of the hiccups that musicians on stage are seeing. There's always there's its own show on stage, and there's the show that the audience is seeing.
I really miss that from my punk band days too, because we really focused on, we're all going to jump, we're going to do this. And now playing in Nashville, there's so much of like, execute the songs, but everybody stands still and does their part and don't be a distraction. And I kind of miss the camaraderie of like, man, we used to go nuts and do all this, but it's a totally different world when you're in that music versus whatever I'm talking about, where it's super mellow or something where you just don't want it to be ridiculous. In the punk world, you want it to be ridiculous and you want it to be over the top. I mean, I remember watching Goldfinger back in the day and John Feldman. I'd never seen a lead singer move so much, play guitar, and be the front man. I'm just like, I don't know how he's doing that. He jumps every song. How does he have any wind capacity to sing? But that's what he did. That's why I loved it.
That's a good, but yeah, there's a whole other level of aerobic workout with some genres. You have to move around a lot because it's easy if you can just stand there, or with some, some drummers, it's a little bit easier than others to be sitting there. But Scott Stapp, how did you get involved with playing with him?
Man, it's one of those, right place, right time. Like almost every gig I've landed, something leads to another gig. And the bass player, Sammy, is our band leader. And he was in the band Everclear for a long time. He's played for Tiffany. He's like street cred, done everything in rock and roll. Well, him and I were in Nashville together. We played a country showcase together for an artist. And so we did this one showcase, couple rehearsals. I got to know him a little bit. Super cool guy. And I just said, what do you do outside here? He goes, oh, I play for Scott Stapp from Creed. I was like, man, that's awesome. That's got to be a fun gig. Do you play all the hits? He's like, man, we do. It's like everything you would think about if you remember Creed when they were massive. And so I thought that, I just said, hey, if you ever need a drummer, let me know. But you say that in town or on a gig, and everybody knows a bunch of drummers. Just like if you called me today and said, need a guitar player, I could think of 10 just like that. And then there's probably 10 I forgot about recently. So you just never know who's going to call you. Well, about 6 months later, Sammy called me and he said, hey, our drummer just had a major accident. He's not going to be going on the road. Would you still be interested in the Scott Stapp gig? And I was out with Fireflight at the time, but the tour was just about ending. I said, when does it start? And he said, we start December 1st. And I said, good, because we are flying with Fireflight, we were going to like Norway and Finland. And I said, I'm not going to leave these guys hanging, so I cannot miss dates. If they have an international flight that's like thousands of dollars, I just won't do that to a band. Well, it was like 10 days after I got home that this next gig started. So I started working on the material. I didn't say anything to anybody. And you don't tell anybody before you get out there, because you might lose the gig. You might get fired. You just never know. So you never want to really say you have a gig until you're there. And then December 1st showed up. This was 2015. And went into rehearsal, and I was really fortunate. I talked to Scott's wife, Jackie, on the phone, and, I'm super close with them now. And I just remember her saying, we haven't heard you play. That's really rare that we would take anybody, but we know you toured with Red. Scott likes Red, and we know that's a band that's got some cool drum stuff in it. And she said, could you send a video? And I just said, I'm really sorry. I'm on tour right now. I cannot send anything. But I said, I promise you, I can play the parts and I'll do a good job. I promise. And so they were really gracious. I mean, they were super gracious to give me a chance without having had heard me play. I mean, they could look up videos, but it's not the same when you play somebody else's music. So I showed up to the rehearsals, and I mean, it's history now with those guys, because now, again, we're like brothers. I've been touring with them this will be our 6th year if we go out this year. So it's like family. It's been the same band since then. And that's when it started. And we went to South Africa that December. It was our first gigs with Scott. And it was crazy because I'd not played anywhere with him. And we got there and we were in 5-star hotels, and they treated us like we were Creed. And I just remember thinking, like, this is it. This is like I finally arrived at a gig. And I'm super thankful because it was such a cool experience, and we did safaris and stuff. But then, we came back to America, and in America, you're still a rock band, and it's not like playing in another country. And so one thing with Scott is we do all these cool international places, but we came back in that January, we started a club tour, and, now we're traveling in the snow, and now we're back to America doing the grind. And it's been an awesome journey for sure. But I've seen, even on this gig, like, we've played huge festivals, and we've played some smaller clubs, and we've played a lot of mid-size, we've played a lot of theaters, we've done an acoustic tour, we've done tons of cool stuff now. But I just remember starting that up. It's like, this is a new journey now from playing what I was doing before that to that. And every new gig has its things that are cool and some that are challenging. But the relationships, I think, are my favorite part, because you build friendships with, just brotherhood with band guys, with crew guys, with people. Sammy is the guy that built my studio. He was our guitar tech last year on tour, and we got super close. And so then he's like, oh, I could do that. I could do the AC. I could do the heating. I could do the electrical. And I'm like, you've been a guitar tech 15 years. How can you do all that? But we build this relationship. And so he built the studio for me. So all that to say, that's all from the Scott gig over the last several years.
I think it's hilarious going to South Africa, and you're just like, casually, go on some safaris and 5-star.
Yeah.
There's things like that with musicians, where, like, some musicians would all of a sudden recalculate and be like, oh, this is the new normal for me now. And then, like, everything kind of shifts. And it's like, being a pro player, as much as you still had the dive bar stuff, and you have the, the South African safari, 5-star hotel, treatment, it's like, there's a lot in between all the time. There's a lot of different levels, and, just your angle, just like being realistic and humble about it, and grateful.
Yeah. And it's a huge factor, because there's so much to be thankful for. So when you have a crappy day, whether it's on the road or home, be like, man, I am so fortunate. I've got to see the world. I've got to play music. I've got to play rock. I've got to play country. I've got to play punk rock. I've got to do worship. I've got to do folk, so many cool things. And it's just easy to forget sometimes. And I think the pandemic's been good for people, because as they miss it, they go, man, if I get a chance to get back out there, play live shows, whether it's a writer's round or a coffee house or an arena, I still think I'm seeing so many of my peers on Facebook, like, I can't believe we're going to play a show again. This is the greatest thing ever. So much to be thankful for, but it really does keep you humble as well, because I've gotten to get on some massive stages, and I've gotten to play to rooms of 3 people. And it's not like every gig is awesome, but if you can be thankful for all the gigs, you can kind of learn something along the way. I'm not saying you learn from every gig, but for a lot of years, you should learn from every gig. And eventually you play enough, you go, I can learn something. I can improve at something. When I'm recording a session for somebody here, it might be the worst song I've ever heard, but I could go, I can get better. I can get better at playing the click. I can learn how to play a shaker better. I can learn what's a better way to, I'm a crappy engineer, so I'm always learning about how can I improve my mics.
Not a crappy engineer. Your drums sound great.
Thank you. But you know what I mean? Like, I'm not trained in that like you are. I didn't go to school for that. So every time I do a session, like, don't screw up this, don't mess up the engineering as well as the drumming. So it keeps you thinking all the time, but constantly you have a chance to improve. And that's one of the things I love about being self-employed, being a drummer. It's like every week, try to get better at teaching lessons, try to take these gigs, try to do the session, try to get better at writing articles. And it takes all these plates spinning to keep my career going, but I'm super fortunate because I enjoy them all. And I think even though they're hard, I'm still like, man, this is the dream. It's not what I pictured 10 years ago or 15 years ago, but I'm legitimately making a living during a pandemic, nonetheless, playing the drums, and that's hard to do. So, doesn't mean I'm the man. I'm just saying I'm super thankful because, man, it's been cool that I have built up all these things that are now working together to go, okay, this is finally enough income where you can actually pay your bills, even if you're not touring, which is usually that's usually my steady, like, best paying thing.
Yeah, no, that's a transition for musicians where you're just like, I'm paying the bills, doing this. Like that's actually, we got one more comment here. Mr. Ian Combs said, I can vouch for Dango's engineering being perfectly competent. I would agree, Ian. I would agree.
I did a record with him that was like really heavy stuff, like, similar to what I've done with you. And it was in my previous room, not this one. So it probably sounded a lot worse, but his mix was killer.
I was debating sharing a short story because I think we crossed paths without knowing each other back in 2017. I think in Toronto, because Scott Stapp did come up to play Toronto. I think it was Toronto in Sarnia or St. Catharines. And I remember, okay, the other thing too, we snuck a song into our set and I told the guys, I'm like, we have to just burn through this because there's no time, because if we have 30 minutes, just go through it. And we ended up going over a little bit. Matt Walsh was there. We had My Darkest Days, Porn Star Dancing in our set with Dead Society. And Matt came up and we're like, okay, let's do Porn Star Dancing with him and it'll be fun. But I remember like, we were starting that song and we had like 2 minutes, like it was like 28 minutes and we're supposed to be done in 2 minutes. I'm like, it's not going to come on time. And I remember the tour manager just burning a hole in me from side stage. And I remember mouthing, I am sorry. I realize what we're doing right now. But again, we hadn't played Toronto yet. We've been on tour for 3 months in the States. And I felt so bad. And I was getting a little bit of the gears from the tour manager after, and we're just getting our crap off stage. Velvet Underground, where we're playing, is maybe 350 or 400 capacity. Like it's not a big venue. And I remember, again, we just get our crap off stage. So you guys can get up there. And I remember seeing Scott Stapp in the hallway, because there's a little like weird stairway from backstage. The bus was back there and coming down. I remember just kind of standing there and like, I didn't get any attitude off him at all. It was like, you make eye contact. It's a quick nod, everyone's doing the rock show thing. Everyone's got their black t-shirts on. And it was just like seeing musicians like that. Cause like he's played the big festivals. He's played the arenas, they've played these gigantic shows to still come and do this and still be able to perform for the fans. And like, our band's watching from merch table at the back of the venue. We're just like, sounds awesome. They're still throwing down. So I just wanted to share that short story. It's like, again, there's a lot in between. So for some artists to think, I'm not going to go play a 400 standing only venue sort of thing downtown Toronto. It's like, no, you know what? Go and give the fans what they want. If it works out on everyone's end, go play the show, because there's a lot in between there. What bands can be doing. So
I will tell you, that is one of the coolest things about Scott. And he's a great dude and family guy. And like, I've been with him so many years now, but he will give 100% if it's 10 people. Just like he's playing to an arena or a stadium. Like that's how he is every night. And a lot of guys are like that, but not are that hardcore. And I sometimes forget, like, he was a true icon and he's lived at the true rock star status before the music world changed and the CDs and all that changed.
Yeah.
Like they sold 50 million albums. He's done it all. and so I sometimes think like, this has got to be hard for him. This is great. We're playing to 2,000 people, but he's used to 10 times that or, 20 times that. But man, he always every night gets up there and he will really sing and he won't have the vocals tracked. And he's just like, he's going to sing like he's bringing the anthems. And he's always cool to people. Like, I'm not surprised at all that he would nod or say, hey, what's up? Doesn't know you. He's just like one of those guys. So whether you love Creed or hate him, and his, he'll get made fun of for his voice because they were so big and he's got that iconic voice, but he doesn't care. He's going to get up and he's going to bring the rock show. And I love that about him.
That comes with the territory, though. And that's the thing. Yeah. It's like, I think too, with some singers, like, it's okay to be polarizing. It's like, if some people love them, some people not so much, but there's like 50 singers you can think of, or some people are like, again, in Canada, we had Rush. We have Geddy Lee. It's like, some people love it. Some people are not a big fan of it. Neil Young, same thing. Some people love him, not a big fan of him. But again, it's good to have an opinion on it. And like, singers are a tone and they are an instrument and they are a voice, and like, that voice, Like he
Yeah.
owns that voice. So I just wanted to share that story because I thought that was cool because, again, coming off the stage as someone who's MDing the band and ran us overtime at one of our best gigs, as far as like, because we did the dive tour for a couple months before that. So to come home and to play to people at a really great show and to not get attitude, because that's all I just, you're just all, the goat ears sort of thing when you're coming off. You're just like, I feel like I've messed this up, but it's still just, hey, how's it going? Quick nod. Have a great show.
Yeah.
Everyone's cool.
And then you and I first worked together, I think 2017 as well. Maybe it was 2018. I feel like it was 2017 when I first recorded.
Buffalo.
Yeah. In Buffalo at that really cool studio, the Goo Goo Dolls one.
Yeah, that's a rad room. GCR.
That drum room's unreal. But that's where I first worked with you. And I'll never forget knowing you were a drummer, and I'm really picky, and I'd play it over and over, and you're like, could you do this? And I'd do it. And you'd be like, if you don't want to, it's fine. I'm like, no, I'm going to get it if you've got an idea. And I just remember you being like, thank you. I'm not used to working with guys who are like willing to try it until they get it. And I was like, if I can't play it, I'm physically going to do it till I can do it.
No, that was a good session. That was fun times. I remember that too, because like there was just a short, or like a narrow window. I think we had 3 days there or something, just like taking all the tracks back to the hotel room and just getting through the editing that night and bringing stuff back in the next day. Oh, those fun times with Scarlet White. I've had you almost an hour and a half. I have one more question. Do you have time? Throughout your path, your career, has there been a certain person that's kind of been there with you for it, where like, because like, you get the Red gig, or you get Scott Stapp gig, or like things start working out with Amber Pacific. Has there been someone that you're just like, I'm looking forward to telling this person, about this next opportunity, this next chapter?
I will say my family's been super supportive, and they're my closest people all along. And so without a doubt, my family. I have a lot of really close friends too, not a lot. I have a handful of super close friends who've been with me since college, 20 years, that have watched my whole career, come to see me play if I'm in their part of the country. And those people, it's probably like a list of, say, 20 or 30 that I could think of easily. But the family has been super supportive, because coming from small town Wisconsin, being a pastor's kid, growing up in church world, like going out and playing rock music, playing punk music, traveling, doing some of the stuff I do, having the tattoos, like a lot of that was, people were shocked. Like, how could you do that where you came from? And my family's been so supportive. And since I really got into music, I felt like this is what God's called me to do and designed me to do. And my family's just been on board with that. So my parents, I'm still super close. I talk to both of them almost every day or every other day. And they're excited to hear about what's going on. So when I'm traveling the world or just on tour, those are the people that really call and check on me. So those are the people I think of right away of like, this is who I'm excited to tell what's going on. Yeah, in social media world, it's fun to be on Facebook and Instagram and be like, I got this really cool experience. But at the end of the day, it's like, I still call my mom and dad and be like, guess what I got to do? This is a bucket list thing. And that's definitely what I think of.
No, it's awesome to hear. Because again, like some people, they don't see the whole journey. They don't hear about the highs and the lows and stuff. And I think it's important too to have people that trusted ears for some of the lows. You can just...
To say to that, I regret in the Amber Pacific days, we were so focused on getting bigger and selling more albums and trying to get to a major label and just the different things we were trying to do. Sometimes we missed that journey. And I look back and think, what a cool journey. We all kind of talked about it now as adults. Like, we were kids, but we sort of didn't realize what we were getting to live at the time and all these fun experiences. And now I try to be more thankful for the little stuff, because I'm like, I've been through the crappy tours and you can learn along the way. So now I still have cool experiences. We did a music video with Scott in Puerto Rico, and I was thinking, what a cool experience to be doing this. I would have been doing this at 25 probably, and just like looking for the next thing. And it's so easy in our society to always be looking for the next thing. But man, be thankful where you're at, because that part of the journey is a cool experience. And if you look at it that way, you're going to enjoy it so much more, because you're appreciating it. You're appreciating the people around you. You're not just like, how do I get to whatever the next thing is? Because then you're never going to be satisfied. You're just always searching if you're not being thankful where you're at.
You gotta, they would say, you gotta smell the roses a little bit along the journey.
For sure.
Right. Is there anybody else you want to say hi to, or anything else you want to shout out while we're here?
Man, I have a lot to be thankful for. I'm thankful for my Scott Stapp family, those dudes in the band, those guys I've toured with. I'm thankful for my Amber Pacific family. I'm also in a worship band, Sonic Flood, totally separate family of guys that I get to see occasionally. And then my Nashville circle, like I got so many good friends here that I play downtown with, or that I record sessions with, or that I hang out and go to Mexican food with and talk about life. My fellow drummers here, like I've got a handful of probably like 10 drummer buddies that I'm super close with, and they all play professionally, and like we're in different scenes, but we have that commonality and brotherhood of like, this is how we do it. And this is, you stick together, you recommend each other. So Nashville's really cool for that, because you have a lot of less competition and more like rooting for each other to do well. So those brothers as well, I would shout out. But that's it, man. I really appreciate you having me.
No, thank you for joining us. Where can everybody find you?
Man, social media, like everybody, I'm Dango Empire on Instagram and Dango Empire on Facebook, and I have a website, Dango Empire, and like that's where my instructional DVD is on there. I do photography on the road, and I've got books for sale that I sell these photo albums, and my drumsticks, signature stick, and all that. Like, it's pretty easy to find. If you look up Dango and drums or Dango Empire, you'll find me on there. So I always tell people, hit me up if you have serious life questions or questions about touring or whatever. I will get back to you. I might be slow, but I promise if you genuinely hit me up on Instagram for something, I will respond.
That is excellent to know. I was unaware of the photography element. That may be for part 2 sometime. We can
yeah,
get some musicians on here, photography. We can all chat about it.
Yeah, that's just newer hobby. That's not like legit. But I do sell my books of touring, and they're fun. It's pictures on the road. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, Dango, thank you very much. I'm just going to wrap stuff up here. Yeah, just hang tight for a second. Oh, what?
Yes.
What?
Last thing. If you're interested in drum lessons, I teach all the time. I take new students all the time. We can do Skype. We can do FaceTime. You can live anywhere in the world. Hit me up as well.
You reminded me of that too, because I was going to ask how you're doing the drum lessons earlier. But yeah, modern times, modern solutions.
Yeah.
All right, Dango, thank you again so much. I'm just going to wrap stuff up here. Just hang tight. I'll see you in a second. Again, my guest tonight, Dango Cellan. Starting out, gospel bands, the super young age. As you were saying before, playing with adult musicians, you're going to get good very fast. I can see him nodding his head in the background. You're going to get good quick when you're playing with adults. And also, it's good to have the right people around you, especially when you're young and you're getting into music, because there's a lot of deterrence, I think, when you start out in music. And being around the wrong people, you can get to a point where you go, maybe this isn't for me. But having the right encouraging people around you can definitely make a big impact on your life. Again, going to school in Nashville, ending up in Seattle, Amber Pacific, doing those Warped tours. You're gonna earn your stripes there doing those tours. Again, I can't thank Dango enough for hopping on here, and lots of real world advice for musicians, not just drummers, but just musicians in general. And again, if you caught the first 20 minutes of this, just talking about endorsements, a lot of that has to do with your character as a musician, because often it's somewhat overlooked a little bit with thinking that we just need to be the best musician, the best drummer, the best guitar player. So much of it gets down to your personality and your character. And the first time I did meet Dango and we're working together, easy to work with, great dude, chill. That makes it fun for everybody. So just always keep that in mind. A big part of being a musician is being a team player. So again, Dango, drummer, instructor, all-around good guy. All right, my name is Mike Langford. It's been another episode of DearBands Live. I'll have Dango's details below if you're watching on YouTube. That being said, if you are watching on YouTube, remember to like, subscribe, and comment. If you're watching on Twitch, remember to follow. If you're watching on Facebook, just remember to share. All right, thanks again. Another episode of DearBands Live with Mike Langford. Thanks for watching. Talk to you later.